Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Worshipful Masters Book Club on the Assemble the Craft YouTube channel. I'm your host, Ken Bray, current Worshipful Master for Lodge number 43 in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'd like to welcome you to this series that I'd like to call the Worshipful Masters Book Club. How this works is every quarter I announce a book at our general stated meeting and encourage the members to read the materials and then join me on this broadcast where we'll talk about the material and what the book was interesting to us, just our own evaluation of the book, not necessarily a book report or anything specific. Just things that stood out in the book or in the materials that we liked, that we didn't like. And also, I'd like to draw up some interest in the Pennsylvania Academy of Masonic Knowledge. So before we begin, and real quick, just so you can see my ugly face, here I am. I pardon my blue glare. It's a protective coating on my glasses. So as we go, we'll figure this out. But before we begin, I just want to make a couple of boring announcements, just a general CYA, if you will. I'd just like to remind everybody that this broadcast is not endorsed by any sort of Grand Lodge or subordinate lodge or appendant body of any sort of Masonic representation. We're going to talk about the Pennsylvania Academy of Masonic Knowledge, but the Pennsylvania Academy of Masonic Knowledge does not endorse this channel. So if you have any questions about the Academy, I would strongly suggest taking it up with them. And also this broadcast, we're going to talk about some of the certification process, and we are going to be discussing a lot of the books that are recommended from the Pennsylvania Academy of Masonic Knowledge. But I would like to remind everybody that this broadcast doesn't count as any sort of certifications, and by no means does this broadcast serve as a substitute for reading any of the materials presented. The discussion is open to the public, so I just ask anyone who takes advantage of the chat function on YouTube to make sure that your comments are on the level and govern yourselves accordingly. Right now, there's only one person watching, which is me, so it's a little bit of relief. So anyway, like I said, none of this is really endorsed by any Grand Lodge. This is just something that I've put together for my own year. I've created this channel to make it so that way I can control the content, and that way I don't really need to sort of seek outside approval. And that way, no specific person or body will, get in trouble if I say something. So with all that boring stuff being said, we are going to talk about the Academy of Masonic Knowledge, how you can get involved, and then also one of the books from the recommended reads, that is The Builders by Joseph Fort Newton. But before we jump right into that, I'm going to pause, not really, just going to kind of throw up a blank screen here for a minute. I have to play around with some settings, but when I come back, we'll get into talking about joining the Pennsylvania Academy of Masonic Knowledge. As far as I know, it's open to Pennsylvania Masons. The program, they have a symposium held at the Elizabethtown Masonic Villages in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. We meet twice a year, or they meet twice a year. They usually have a fall symposium and a spring symposium, and they have some speakers come in. And I will link to the Academy's website where you can go on, check it out. And they have some of their videos hosted from some of the previous symposiums and some of the previous speakers who have broadcasted and gave talks, and you can go back and watch some of those, and it's pretty interesting. And I think Pennsylvania has a pretty unique program, and the fact that it's endorsed by the Grand Lodge means that it sort of gets that extra attention, and it's broadcasted a lot more to the Masonic bodies. And the symposiums draw a large amount of people that come out, not just from Pennsylvania, but from all over. I know the program itself for the Academy, I think, is geared just towards Pennsylvania Masons. So if you are a Pennsylvania Mason and you're looking to get involved, I'm going to go through some of the brief, how you sign up, how you can get involved, some of the books that are recommended, and then we'll jump right in and talk about The Builders by Joseph Fort Newton. So once again, I'm just going to take a quick break. I know I just started, but just taking a quick break so I can get the YouTube chat function up, and then we'll go from there. So stick around. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back in a couple of seconds. Actually, you'll still be able to hear me, so ignore the mouse clicking. So I'm just going to quickly show the live broadcast feed. On the right-hand side, you'll notice there is a chat function where you can submit questions or any comments you may have. Anything that would pertain to joining the Academy or anything about the book in itself. And then I'll try to keep people somewhat entertained. So if you're looking to get involved with the Academy of Masonic Knowledge, I would strongly suggest going to their website, and I'll put a link to that in the description once this video is published. But how you become a member is you have to fill out an application form, and it's not really 100% on the website. If you look, you have to go into the certification program and then certification process. And here it talks about the certification process, but you'll see there's a click here to complete a certificate program enrollment form. You'll need to click that, fill that out, and email it to the Academy of Masonic Knowledge, and they'll respond back to you and let you know that you're enrolled in the program and you can start beginning to earn some of your MEUs, or Masonic Education Units, which on the right-hand side of the screen you can see here is being displayed. So when I first joined the Academy, it was sort of old school back then. You had to mail in everything. You had to mail in all your reports. You had to mail in your application form to see if you were enrolled in the program. And now they've sort of adopted sort of a more faster, more responsive way, and everything is done electronically, which is really nice. And it's made the overall experience a whole lot better. So some of the ways that you can earn some of these Masonic Education Units, or MEUs, is by reading some books. There's some elective books. There are some required books. You can get points for attending the Academy of Masonic Knowledge symposiums. You can prepare articles and presentations. And right now I'm a Masonic level 2, working on my level 3. And essentially in your first level, you can earn enough credits just by reading books on Freemasonry. You'll see here there's some required reading, and then there's some suggestion areas for some elective reading. And like I said, The Builders is a highly recommended book, and that's on the required readings for the Academy of Masonic Knowledge, especially geared towards level 1. These are guys that are just either new to the fraternity or just new to the program and want to learn more about Freemasonry, and then The Builders is a really great place to start. When you get into level 2, you can't get by just by reading books alone. You do have to prepare some speeches. You can get points still, again, for attending some of the Academy symposiums, and also for writing some papers. Now, how I received my level 2 was there was a lot of books that I read, and then I also presented presentations to give at Lodge. This is something that for all the current Worshipful Masters, myself included, this is something extremely valuable. If someone comes to you and says that they have a Masonic presentation that they would like to talk about, that's wonderful news, because we have to sort of go through and plan out our years. And I can tell you just experience from my own year being in the East, I've had to reschedule my programs almost every month. So it's nice. It's a little bit of a relief to have a brother that is involved in the Academy and that can present on some of the topics and some of the materials that they've read. Again, the recommended reads for level 2, a lot more involved. There's a lot of, it talks more, some of these books they go into more of some of the anti-Masonic movement and sort of dispelling some of that. Those of you that are Freemasons know that there is no general one speaker on behalf of Freemasonry that goes to bat, I guess, that will dispute any sort of claims. If someone does sort of get into an argument with you about Freemasonry, we just usually let it go at that point because it's not worth it. The level 3 certification requires you to read materials again, but you also have to present a Masonic research paper. Now, this is something that I'm sort of caught between. I have a number of ideas that I would like to do, a number of things I'd like to pursue. How exactly they're involved with Freemasonry, I don't know. So, still kind of working that out. But that is the very gist of the Academy. It's something that is sponsored, is sanctioned by the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. So when you become a Master Masonic Scholar or a Level 3 certification, you're given a jewel that you're allowed to wear at any Masonic function. And because it's sanctioned by the Grand Lodge, you can wear this jewel at any sort of Blue Lodge function, and it's an acceptable piece of attire. Well, it's an acceptable jewel. It's to sort of distinguish you as a Masonic scholar, and also to sort of drum up some inquiries on how you got that jewel and how other people can get involved in the Academy. So like I said, the application process isn't that difficult. It does require you to fill out a form and email that in, and then someone will get back to you and let you know. And then the other thing I would strongly suggest is come out to some of the symposiums. Go to the PA Academy website and see when they have these symposiums hosted, and come out to Elizabethtown to see some of the programs that they have. It's open to all Masons. So it's a wonderful program that's put on by the state, by the Grand Lodge. I'm sorry, not the state. And it's something I really highly recommend you taking advantage of. So one of the things that I ran into when I first got involved was these book evaluations. And I can tell you the first couple book evaluations that I did, I was writing 10 to 12 page reports on a book. And thankfully, the gentleman who was reviewing my book reports got back to me and let me know that it wasn't necessary. I didn't have to write a 10-page report. It was just a simple 1 or 2 pages, a book evaluation on what I felt the book, what a part of the book what I thought was important, things about the book that I liked, things that I may have learned from the book that I didn't otherwise know, and even if I didn't like the book, what I didn't like about it. And I at least have 2 book evaluations of books that I absolutely just did not like. And, it's perfectly acceptable. But again, any sort of specific questions, I would highly recommend reaching out to the Academy and asking them for clarification on what it is that they would like to see you write about. So today, we are going to be discussing The Builders by Joseph Fort Newton. This is a wonderful book. It's a wonderful introduction to Freemasonry. I would highly recommend this book to all new Masons. And also, there's another book by Chris Hodap called Freemasonry for Dummies. And it sounds silly, but that book is also a really great resource. Freemasonry for Dummies kind of explains the ins and outs of Lodge. The Builders gives you a little bit of a perspective on the foundations of Freemasonry and kind of explains the working tools, some of the stories in Masonry, with a little bit of history, so you can kind of see where this all ties into. And before I go too much into that, the book is very well written. Having read numerous Masonic works, I can tell you some of these books are very dry. It does take sort of a lot to get through. And this book is pretty well written, and if you're interested enough, I found that this was a pretty easy read. And one of the things that The Builders opens up with is he talks about Egyptian culture. Not so much that the ancient Egyptians had Masonic lodges, but just sort of talks about the importance of Masonry, operative Masonry, which a lot of what Freemasonry is built on, and how Freemasonry itself developed from the workers of the Egyptian, what's the word I'm looking for? Pyramids and all of the great architecture is kind of what is the foundation of Freemasonry. And one of the things that he talks about is just something as simple as the square. And something that I found was extremely interesting was that the first squared building was found in Egypt. And I'm going to butcher the name of these places, but I believe it's pronounced Nekin. And this is where the first squared building was actually found. And it's something very interesting because when you listen to some of the lessons taught in Freemasonry and we talk about the working tools, something as simple as the square, a right angle, if you will. And if you can just imagine the importance of a right angle in very early architecture and very early construction, how important the square is. And it's one of those tools that we're taught to square our actions by the square of virtue. And it's interesting that it's probably one of the most overlooked aspects of Masonry, and how without it, no upright building would stay erected. It's kind of a silly analogy, but I thought that was something in the book that I thought was really interesting. And Joseph Fort Newton talks about early architecture, early construction, and how some of these very functional working tools play such a huge part in Masonry now. And it just builds the foundation of all the lessons that we have learned. And that's kind of where it kind of hooked me. If you look, the Pennsylvania Grand Lodge has an Egyptian hall, and there's a lot of Grand Lodges that have Egyptian halls, and they talk about Egyptian culture, and that's basically the very beginnings of architecture and construction that we know. And because some of these great, wonderful monuments that were built were all done by hand, and it's amazing to look at that level of architecture and to see that its beginnings have something similar to Masonry and how we've built our stories on this very early architecture. That's basically, when you write an evaluation report, that's something that would be extremely promoted, extremely, that's the word I'm looking for. They would highly recommend that you write something to that effect. Like, what about this book did you like? And that's the whole point behind these book evaluations. They want to know what about the builders that you liked. And for me, and a lot of it had to do with the early connections to Egyptian culture, which I thought was extremely fascinating. Now, aside from actually pulling up my book evaluation report, like I said, the early ones that I written were like 10 and 12 pages. But if you look beyond that, the Egyptian aspect of it is what really sort of fascinated me. And then the other aspect of it was Joseph Fort Newton started to talk about the Regis manuscript and some of the vows of the entered apprentice Mason. And one of the earliest vows were binding themselves to a solemn oath to serve under rigid rules for a period of 7 years. And these early practices of the entered apprentice Mason ensured that when a man was involved in Freemasonry, that he would fully devote himself to the fraternity. And it also meant that he would earn his degrees by earning his time and putting in the wages to earn that level. I can't even think of the word I'm looking for now. He would earn his degrees through his wages. And after serving a period of 7 years as an apprentice, they would showcase or present their masterpiece to the lodge for strict trial and due examination. And in order to be declared a master, you would need to be very proficient in the work of Masonry. And I think that has a lot to do with where Pennsylvania Freemasonry is today. Sorry, I'm minimizing a lot of stuff. And how the Right Worshipful Grand Master this year is really focused on Masonic education and really wants newly entered Masons and even Masons who have been involved to really learn more about Freemasonry and what it means to them, and to really, to sort of follow along with Joseph Fort Newton writes, really sort of take it seriously and earn their degrees through their wages. And I know that's something that I feel is extremely important. Having been involved in Freemasonry for over 5 years, I find that even though I've been involved for this long, I still find new aspects of Masonry that I thoroughly enjoy. And it's something that I think most people take advantage of. You come in and you get your 3 degrees and you're out the door and you're good to go. And some of the lessons you may have picked up on, some of them may have gone completely over your head. And I think that's sort of what Joseph Fort Newton was trying to get at with the builders, really trying to kind of give you a strong foundation of what Masonry really means and how far it's come to really solidify itself as an established fraternity. And one of the other things that I wrote about, I'm going to slide this over here. Some of the earlier terms, like Freemasonry, where exactly did that come from? And in order to be a Freemason, you had to be proficient in your work, and in order for you to get work outside of your jurisdiction or wherever it may be, you had to be able to travel. So the term Freemason meant that these men were free to travel, and they were free to travel and look for work. It's kind of like the basics of what the term Freemason means. But it's again, there's so much information in the builders, and I know I'm kind of jumping around, but um, these were sort of the things that really stuck out in my mind. First was that connection to ancient Egypt and the forming of the square, which, if we take a look, this is the actual building that they found that was square. It doesn't look like a whole lot, but it's pretty impressive if you think about it. Just having very basic tools, these men were able to build such wonderful things. And the other thing that I also wrote about in the book that I thought was extremely interesting was the story of Osiris, and how Osiris was one of the gods that was kind of um, overthrown, if you will, and sort of ripped apart. And anyway, it just talks about when Horus, son of Osiris, discovered his father's grave. Osiris could only be awakened by the aid of a strong grip of the lion-like. Herein lies a true tale of good versus evil. It just there's so many connections to Masonry, and so many of the stories in Freemasonry are given a really strong foundation. And I've probably abused that word and really used that a lot during this broadcast, but I cannot stress enough how much the builders really kind of helps really build a foundation for Masonry. And a lot of the stories that are in the book, a lot of the analogies and things that Joseph Fort Newton writes about really help solidify some of the experiences that you'll go through and kind of put everything into perspective, and gives everything that, solemn and seriousness behind the oath and obligation, behind the tools, and really just the meaning of Freemasonry in general. So what I'd like to do on future broadcasts is to invite some of you through Google Hangouts to join me and discuss some of these books, what it means to you, what Masonry and these materials that are being presented have in common, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. And I know that this was kind of a very early crash course for a whole whopping half hour, not even. But this is basically what I'm trying to do, and make it sort of an informal presentation about what I thought some of the materials that I've read mean to me through the Academy, and also to help sort of jumpstart you to get involved in Freemasonry, to check out the Academy, and to get involved and read some of the materials. And it's not as intimidating as it may seem. When I first started, like I said, everything was mailed in, and it was a process. It took some time. But now that everything is electronic, and now that the symposiums are broadcasted on YouTube, it's a lot more accessible, a lot more obtainable, and it's a lot less intimidating. And I would strongly suggest anybody out there that is looking to get involved, especially Pennsylvania Freemasons that are looking to get involved with the certification process and really take it all the way, I would highly recommend getting involved, because my experience so far for the last 4 years with the Academy has been absolutely wonderful. And like I said, I'm just completed my level 2, and I'm working on my level 3 Master Masonic Scholar, and I can't wait to get all the way to the end. But even after that, I plan on continuing with the program as much as that I can, and to be involved as much as possible, because it's really wonderful, and it really helps you understand more about the craft. In Pennsylvania, we have something that haven't done for a couple of years, but we used to do one-day classes. You would come in the morning and leave a Mason. You would come in as just a guy off the street looking to petition Masonry. Now, you still had to go through the petition process, but you would basically come in as a non-Mason, and at the end of the day, you would leave as a full-fledged Mason. And a term that I've often used in our lodge, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's a lot of information that's thrown at you all at once. And in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Masons will know that the way that Pennsylvania does things is very unique compared to other jurisdictions and other states. And so to go through a one-day class and to be made a Mason rather quickly, you're left with a lot of unanswered questions. I went through the traditional route through all of my 3 degrees, but I joined Scottish Rite, and had sort of a similar experience with Scottish Rite. I kind of was blasted through a bunch of degrees, and at the end of the day, I just didn't know where I was, where I was from from where I came in. And so doing this, getting involved in the academy, has really sort of helped me understand more about Freemasonry, more about some of the lessons that are taught, and it kind of helps put things into perspective. And all that has come through my involvement with the academy just as a participant. And like I said, I'd highly recommend that. So anyway, pretty short and sweet. The Worshipful Masters Book Club, we're going to try to do this every quarter. So in another couple, maybe 2 or 3 months, I'll do this again. We'll discuss a new book, and I will probably have some updates between now and then that will broadcast on this channel. So if you would like to, please subscribe, sign up for notifications. I'll work on whatever's going on back here and whatever's going on my face. But this is just sort of a trial run to see how I can portray involvement and get others to be excited about the Academy of Masonic Knowledge, the books that I present, what they meant to me, what I thought was interesting about them. May not be exactly what you'll think is interesting about it, but it's something that just struck a chord with me. And like I said, The Builders by Joseph Fort Newton was a wonderful book. It had a lot of explaining, a lot of the tools, a lot of the history, and a lot of sort of the background of Masonry, if you will. So that is it for today. Thanks again for joining me. If you'd like to see future broadcasts, let me know in the comments. And again, I'll put all the links to the Academy of Masonic Knowledge in the description below. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the next one. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Bye. Nope, I'm still here. Still learning how to use this. There we go. Take care.